Stay tuned for one of the most fascinating programs you'll ever hear as we explore the strange and mysterious world of the paranormal and UFOs. Welcome to the Paranet Continuum, a weekly program dealing with extraordinary claims of the paranormal on Earth and beyond. Whether or not you believe in the paranormal, the controversies are real, and this program will try to get to the bottom of it. Your host is Michael Corbin, Director of Paranet Information Services, a global communications network based near Denver, Colorado, dedicated to the investigation of parapsychology, futuristic science, and the UFO enigma. We invite you to keep an open mind as we discuss some of the most fascinating and strange subjects around. Now here's your host, Michael Corbin.
And good evening. Last week, my guest, Dr. Rod Lewis, discussed his research into the connections between government research and occult technologies, namely remote viewing. Now, this whole subject has been the focus of considerable controversy in the public arena. As you may remember, Dr. Lewis pointed out that he has found a considerable amount of data indicating that there could be intelligence operators who are conducting black magic rituals as part of defense-related research. On the surface now, to me at least, this sounds outrageous, but my guest tonight is an author and investigative reporter who has published a book, we're going to go into that in more detail, about allegations of black magic, Satanism, mind control, and its linkage to the U.S. intelligence community. Heavy, heavy stuff indeed. It's all right here on the Paranet Continuum, but first I want to mention to be sure and stay tuned tonight as we will draw for that Paranet t-shirt giveaway during the last segment of the hour. You could be the lucky winner of one of the most fabulous t-shirts in the world. Now, I got a couple of little news items for you as well. See here, something about planets being discovered. Let me look it up here. We've got the computer plugged into Netscape this evening, and I've got an image. I got a report here. Alex, it's an astronomer named Alex Wolszczan, professor of astronomy and astrophysics at Penn State University, is not the first scientist to propose the existence of another planetary system, but he is the first to verify that such a system exists. In April 1994, in Science, Wolszczan presented results that came as no surprise to anyone in the audience. 2 years earlier, Wolszczan had proposed that there were two, perhaps three, planets orbiting a small, dense star more than 1,500 light years away from our solar system. He came to this conclusion through the timing analysis of irregularities in the pulsed signals received from the star by the radio telescope at Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico. When Wolszczan applied a perturbation model to a new set of observations from Arecibo, the model fit. His idea is no longer a theory, but in his words, it's the fact. Although different methods will have to be applied when looking for planets that could support intelligent life in solar systems more like our own, scientists involved in this quest are greatly encouraged by the implications of finding planets orbiting such unlikely stars as pulsars. If pulsars can spawn planets, the odds are good that there are other kinds of planetary systems waiting to be discovered. Wolszczan's research is keeping pace with the development of improved techniques for searching the radio sky and with advances in computing technology. He needed a supercomputer at the Cornell Theory Center to examine his initial data, but when it came time to do the confirming tests, he was able to run them on a workstation in his lab, although the computation took 2 weeks. Astrophysicists do not expect to find the little prints on these new planets. Pulsars are not the kind of stars likely to support life as we know it, but the concept of other worlds captures the imagination, and the search for more millisecond pulsars has been heating up. Now Wolszczan is preparing to explore the new world he has discovered. Using scalable parallel computing technologies, he plans to examine the orbits of the planets in the system, and thus gain insights into their evolution. In recognition of the importance of his discovery, Wolszczan received a grand award for innovative achievement in science and technology from the editors of Popular Science on November 4, 1994. His work is featured in the magazine's annual Best of What's New section of its December 94 issue. That's a story that came off of the internet. So Alex Wolszczan, Penn State University, talking about the discovery of two planets about 1,500 light years from Earth, rotating around a pulsar. Okay, here's something a little bit more on the lighter side of the news. There's an article in Straight Talk which came out of USA Weekend. You remember Fire in the Sky, don't you? The movie about the Travis Walton experience. Well, D.B. Sweeney was the star. He played Travis Walton. He makes a comment regarding. Actually, he's got a new program coming up. Let's see. Let me find it here. The new program is called Strange Luck. It's going to be Fridays, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. Anyway, Sweeney has a comment for Aliens. He says, and I'm quoting, "In Fire in the Sky, I played a guy who's abducted on a UFO. Now everywhere I go, people tell me how they were abducted. I have advice for aliens who abduct humans. Keep them, because we're sick of hearing their stories." So that's a comment from D.B. Sweeney. Okay, my guest is author of a newly released book, and one that is sure to draw some attention. It's titled Objective Evil: Satanism in the U.S. Intelligence Community. He is an investigative reporter who has written for various publications in the Denver area and around the United States. This book is the culmination of several years of work and presents some pretty startling implications for the direction that this country is heading in, if this is true. Believe it or not, there is a UFO angle to this whole thing, which we're going to discuss tonight. He is R. Roy Blake, and I want to welcome Roy to the program. Good evening.
Thank you.
Roy, let's start off by I want to ask you real quick, why the title of the book, Objective Evil?
Well, Objective Evil is because the main character that made this book possible is a fellow named Colonel Michael Aquino. He's a director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and also the Army Psychological Operations Division. He's also a former high priest of the Church of Satan, and has formed his own Temple of Set, which is a break off of the Church of Satan. Anyway, he's written several books on mind war. Clearly into he's been on the Oprah Winfrey Show. He'd been more or less a secret until there were some child molestation allegations against him in the San Francisco Bay Area. One of his teachings is that there is no such thing as objective evil. That there's an elite of people that knows that evil is only a subjective thing, that only the masses of us stupid people believe that there's such a thing as objective evil. And the full title, Objective Evil, Satanic Cults in U.S. Intelligence, is because he proves the existence of it just by himself, and my further investigation showed that he's hardly an aberration. There is this sort of thing going on throughout the intelligence community, not just in the experimentation with the paranormal, in the day-to-day things having to do with covert ops. It's an absolutely mind-boggling subject, the whole thing. As I mentioned earlier, or as I mentioned to you, he's also a member of the National Space Institute, which makes some of the things that he tells to his followers in a restricted variety, third-degree Satanists and higher, very curious indeed.
Now, I guess most of the time now, for myself, example, I don't care what a person practices personally, but what really kind of disturbs me about this research that you've done is that, when you think of Satanism and that type of thing, you think of rock and roll music, and the kind of classic stuff that people associate with it. You don't associate someone who's a colonel in the Army, somebody that might be involved in something like this. How does this all come down? I mean, obviously this is true. How does all this balance?
Well, my personal opinion is that Aquino might well have been a product of generational Satanism. That's something that's been underground in this country since the 1950s. There's a group here in Colorado talks about it called Justice Unlimited, and there's a group that called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which has attempted to discredit these people's memories. A lot of them are recovered memories because the trauma was so complete. It actually is fairly extensive. It has roots. The intelligence satanic connection goes back at least to the Civil War, and Albert Pike, who's one of the great founders of Masonism in this country, has a statue in Washington, D.C., and is also one of the co-founders of the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan he gave that an occult tradition. It isn't really Christian. The burning cross is very much a satanic symbol. It seems obvious on the surface that it is, but then you have some of the less knowledgeable Klansmen claiming that they're Christians. and the thing goes back to an occultist named Eliphas Levi from the middle part of the 19th century, of whom Pike was a follower. Then there's a fellow by the name of Aleister Crowley, who Aquino calls the first beast of the apocalypse. He gave himself that name, the Beast 666. He was involved with British intelligence and French intelligence, both in World War I, possibly World War II. Hitler supposedly was quite a follower of a lot of the things he said, supposedly. So there's also quite a history of occultism going back to the SS, and it's talked about very extensively with Heinrich Himmler, for instance, who had the magic castle at Wellsburg.
Okay, let's hold it there. Hold your thought there. We got to take our break. 1-800-836-2009, 1-800-836-2009. My guest is Roy Blake, author of Objective Evil, Satanic Cults in the U.S. Intelligence Community. Give us a call. It's toll-free number. I hear from you tonight. I'm Michael Corbin, and you're listening to the Paranet Continuum. We'll be right back. Paranet wants to hear from you tonight, and we want to give away a T-shirt to you. We're doing this a little different than the way we've given away T-shirts before. If you're hearing us live between 7 and 8 Mountain Time, we invite you to call us at 1-800-UFO-2009. That's 1-800-836-2009, and give us your name and address. Now, we're going to draw from all of these names, let's see, for a T-shirt from Paranet. It's the same T-shirt you've heard us advertising before. It's 100% cotton, black with galaxies, stars, comets, the Paranet logo, and a beautiful blue-green planet Earth. Give us a call now at 1-800-836-2009 for that. Give your name and address and for the T-shirt giveaway. And we'll be giving a drawing tonight, so stay tuned.
It's been said that the pen is mightier than the sword. With Paranet, the computer and modem is mightier than the pen. Paranet is the world's foremost electronic authority on UFOs and the paranormal. Paranet gives you rapid access to UFO researchers and others like you who want to know what's going on. You'll find stimulating discussions with an interactive link to the world through the Internet's information superhighway. There's a variety of departments dealing with paranormal activities, parapsychology, alien abduction research, conspiracy theories and government cover-ups, and cutting-edge science. There's even a skeptics conference. Paranet also has the world's most comprehensive database of news articles, sighting reports, and much more available for a small fee. So plug into power and knowledge with Paranet. Call the data line at 303-863-0469. That's 303-863-0469. Or for more information, contact Paranet at 303-863-0484. Truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. Finding out the truth is the hard part. Join us in our search with the Paranet Continuum. Here's your host, Michael Corbin.
1-800-836-2009, 1-800-836-2009. My guest is Roy Blake. We're talking about his book, Objective Evil, Satanic Cults in the U.S. Intelligence Community. And as you know, we've had several people on the program over the last few months talking about some of this stuff. Last December, we had John Rappaport, who was talking about the U.S. government mind control experimentation on children. This stuff keeps cropping up, Roy, and I mean, it's just all over the place out there, and we see this come across the Paranet network and the internet and different places like that. From your research, what are the links that you have found between satanic cults and the U.S. intelligence communities?
Well, from the Justice Unlimited, one of the largest groups of people that were abused, besides what they call satanic ritual abuse, was a new form of abuse which I had not heard of. I guess they said something like a third or a quarter of the people who had been abused and remembered their abuse called it a militaristic abuse, in which they were a lot of them on military bases, a lot of them subjected to the MK Ultra sorts of experimentation. MK Ultra, for anyone who isn't familiar with the subject, was the CIA's bizarre experiments. That was the experiments, for instance, the biological warfare experiments to create bacteriums and viruses genetically engineered. Also, mind control was in that, and also the LSD experiments, all those things. And in fact, they sometimes ran into one another. One of the biological warfare engineers jumped out of a hotel room in New York City, supposedly on LSD.
Olson?
That was Olson, yeah.
Now, the MK Ultra stuff, now we know that exists because essentially the church committee in 74?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
In the 70s, yeah. Uh-huh. They basically exposed this type of thing. It had been going on since the 50s.
Right.
Allegedly, though, this stuff has stopped.
Right. Gerald Ford signed an executive order ordering the CIA to stop the mind control experimentation. However, there were partners. The Army, Psychological Division, and the Defense Intelligence Agency were all partners with the CIA and were not covered by this executive order. And in fact, through my Freedom of Information Act request, I found out that there's a good deal of documents existent since 1977 that I got a few of from the Defense Intelligence Agency, indicating that in fact their interest in this is ongoing.
Okay, now their interest in mind control.
Right.
Okay. Now, what the documents that you've gotten that have been released that indicate this kind of stuff is still going on?
Right.
What types of things are they messing around with, the Defense Intelligence Agency, when it comes to mind control? I know there's been allegations about psychotronic research, which we've talked about a lot. What other kinds of things are going on? Now, you mentioned earlier, and I want to go back to that in your answer, but you mentioned something about, a lot of people talking about being taken to military bases. How many of these people are, in other words, is there any proof that verifies that they were taken to military bases, or are these basically stories?
Well, most of it happens, as you say, to small children, and small children aren't used as witnesses very well in most courts of law, and it's or else people that are not in a position to say such things, and this is done, for a good reason, that they don't make credible witnesses. I will point out we got a copy of Aquino's paper here from PSYOP to Mind War, the Psychology of Victory, in which he co-wrote with Colonel Paul Vallely.
Now, let me interrupt you real quick. This document you've got, this is an official document written under his banner of...
Well, he was major at the time rather than a lieutenant colonel.
But this was an official document that was circulated in the military.
Right,
Okay.
And anyway, it makes the point that PSYOPs should be used on the entire population of a country to help win a war. That it starts out with a thing like the Germans said we were stabbed in the back, saying that we lost in Vietnam because we were out PSYOPed. The PSYOPs, first of all, Aquino was a psychological operations person in Vietnam. It was highly decorated because of he invented a program which caused 13,000 or so, I believe, NVA and VC to surrender without a fight. So he was highly decorated, and the Army's part of the reason the Army's put up with him as long as they have covered for him. But they make the point that the Army also already possesses, I'm quoting from the paper, the Army already possesses an operational weapon system designed what LTC Alexander would like ESP to do, except that this weapon system uses existing communications media. It seeks to map the minds of neutral and enemy individuals and then to change them in accordance with U.S. national interests. It does this on a wide scale, embracing military units, regions, nations, and blocks. In its present form, it is called psychological operations.
Now he's claiming in that paper that there's already a weapon in place.
Yes.
When was this paper written?
The exact date on this paper, I'm really not sure of. I believe it was the early 80s, early 1980s.
Okay. Now, does that we know what that weapon is?
Well, there are several possibilities for this weapon, which are discussed in the back. The first possibility is taking advantage of phenomena such as atmospheric electromagnetic activity, air ionization, and the third possibility, which I think is the best possibility, extremely low frequency waves or ELF waves.
So we could be talking about microwave radiation,
right?
That type of thing.
Yes.
Okay, hold that thought. We'll come back and we'll get into a little bit more of that, psychotronics and mind control and all this other stuff. It's quite a deep subject. My guest is Roy Blake. We're talking about his book, Objective Evil: Satanic Cults in the U.S. Intelligence Community. Stay tuned, and you'll be able to hear at the end of the program how you can get a copy of this book. I'm Michael Corbin, and you're listening to the Paranet Continuum.
There are many magazines about UFOs. Continuum is different. Continuum is the official quarterly publication of Paranet and MyCat, and is the outgrowth of Paranet's worldwide communications network on paranormal phenomena. It's in-depth, challenging, and above all, fascinating. It takes a straight-ahead, no-nonsense look at UFOs, worldwide sighting reports, parapsychology, abduction phenomena, futuristic science, and much, much more. You can get Continuum for just $18 a year. Continuum is also available by fax for a small additional fee. Be informed. Call now and subscribe to Continuum. Call 1-800-UFO-NET-1. That's 1-800-836-6381. Continuum, published by Paranet Information Services and MyCat. Order yours today at 1-800-UFO-NET-1. Continuum, one of the most fascinating magazines you'll ever read.
This is an invitation for investors to get personally involved in Paranet. Paranet is more than just this radio show. Paranet Information Services Incorporated is dedicated to exploration of the UFO enigma and other paranormal phenomena. Paranet also publishes Continuum magazine and operates online UFO and paranormal computer services. If you're a qualified investor who shares our enthusiasm, give us a call. Contact Brian Wood at 970-635-2494. That's Brian Wood at 970-635-2494.
Imagine you're at a lake and a man has fallen in.
Right now, thousands of people are dying waiting for organ and tissue transplants.
You throw a rope.
If you've decided to be a donor, you must tell your family now so they can carry out your decision later.
The rope. The man can't reach it.
Otherwise, it's like throwing a 12-foot rope to someone who's 15 feet away. Organ and tissue donation. Share your life. Share your decision. To learn more, call 1-800-355-SHARE. This message brought to you by the Coalition on Donation and the Ad Council.
One 1-800-836-2009, 1-800-836-2009. My guest is Roy Blake. We're talking about Objective Evil: U.S. Satanism in the U.S. intelligence community, and quite a deep subject. Roy, how did you get involved in this? How did you get interested in this subject? I'm curious.
Well, I've been an investigative reporter, either for newspapers or as a freelance investigative reporter since 1978. This particular story was the result of some pieces that I was doing for a little paper in town here called Metropolitan Accent, which was attempting to go up against Westward for a while, and they wanted some good investigative pieces. The first piece I gave them, which was about how Gary Hart was set up in the '88 campaign. That's a long story, so I don't want to go into that.
Sure.
The second piece had to do with Iran-Contra and some of the local figures that were involved in Iran-Contra, including a fellow named Heinrich Ruppwich out of Aurora, who was in the Luftwaffe, was recruited by the CIA, flew for Air America, and alleges in federal court that he was the pilot for William Casey in the October surprise meetings in Paris. The third one was the result of a local thing that happened, a little satanic cult at a little high school in Aurora, where a student ended up dead. The police ruled at the time that it was an accidental shooting. In investigating that, a lot of the students came forward and started talking to me about the cult, about things having to do with the cult, where the cult met. The code of silence had really been broken by the students being upset about what was really a murder of this other student. And one of the most curious things they told me was how the cult wasn't really just high school students that were into heavy metal. It was run by adults, and not only adults, but adults that would be considered pillars of the community.
Let me ask you this now. Bring this around to the UFO thing. I mean, we hear a lot of stuff out there. Okay, abduction phenomena, for example, where people are allegedly taken from their beds. There is one theory that runs throughout the UFO field or the research community that says that, matter of fact, Walter Bauert, who's been on the program a couple of times talking about mind control, this kind of thing overlaps. We hear this come up in this kind of stuff, that there's a possibility. Like there's a paper that's circulating out there called The Controllers, a guy named Martin Cannon wrote in California, that basically says that alien abductions might be nothing more than some type of psychological warfare, mind control manipulation, including implants and that type of thing. What do you say to that?
Well, there is an overlap. The French author Vallée. You know
Jacques Vallée, yes.
Yeah, okay. He's long been of the opinion that there and has fairly good proof that there's an overlap, certainly with French intelligence. Mm-hmm. Not just Vallée, but Aquino as well is an interesting. He sits on the National Space Institute. To his followers that are third-degree Satanists and higher, he talks about in an article for one of his publications called "The Cloning of Nikki Sixx." Nikki Sixx was a musician with Motley Crue. The original Nikki Sixx, certainly one of the most satanic of the whole group, got in some serious trouble in Florida, and they got him put under house arrest and basically got a clone or somebody else that they said was Nikki Sixx to play his part in the band. Well, anyway, he wrote to the Temple of Set, which was Aquino's group, claiming that he, and saying, that he wanted to join the Temple of Set and was a Satanist and all that. And Aquino talks about that through the kind efforts of I believe an alien named Pantechnicon from the Andromeda Galaxy.
An alien?
Named Pantechnicon from the Andromeda Galaxy. They were able to give him help obtaining lawyers and this sort of thing. Aquino's most secret book, which is the hardest to obtain, even though I've had 4 or 5 defectors from the Temple of Set give me materials, I was never able to obtain this. It's called The Dark Side. It's an opposite of Star Wars sort of thing, and then interestingly enough, takes place in the Andromeda Galaxy. Aquino, as high up as an official as he is in the Defense Intelligence Agency, absolutely top secret clearance, reports only to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, tells his followers, although not the public, that indeed he does believe there was a Philadelphia experiment.
A Philadelphia experiment.
Yes.
He does believe that.
Yes. In fact, he even refers to some stuff which shows that time reversal can be shown in an ordinary chemistry lab on the subatomic level.
Let me ask you a question. We're going to talk about the Philadelphia experiment briefly because I know you mentioned that in your book. It's under the auspices of the Montauk Project, which is Moon and Preston Nichols. And
Right.
I can't remember. Is it Peter Moon?
Peter Moon.
Peter
yes.
Moon, yeah. But I have a question. I guess maybe you've probably been asked this before, but what proof do we have that Mr. Kino's or Colonel Kino's Satanism background is intermeshing with his job? In other words, what do we have that we say that the Satanism part flows into the professional part of his work?
Well, he made that point when he wrote a letter to my editor when I did the original article for Accent, which mentioned him, and he said that he saw nothing sinister with the fact that he was both a Satanist and also head of the Army Psychological Operations Department. To which I answered in my book that I thought that was an incredible lack of an imagination for a fellow with a reported IQ of 155, or else an extremely different perspective. And as I mentioned from Objective Evil, I think that the latter answer is true. He has an extremely different perspective.
I think it's kind of interesting that, I admit that it's interesting that he would hold such a high position militaristically or politically, if you will, and at the same time have this type of a background, because I know a lot of people just in my research talking to scientists about the subject of UFOs. For example, I have a source in NASA. The guy is very afraid that if he is even associated with UFO research, that he might be ostracized by his peers in the scientific community. And I kind of wonder why that doesn't happen to Aquino.
Well, Aquino is also a big believer in vampires. His the second highest order in the Temple of Set is the Order of the Vampire. His wife is a Grand Master Vampire. One of the other members of the Defense Intelligence Agency that's a member of the Temple of Set, Dennis Mann, is a vampire, as well as a lawyer, which gave us the only comedy relief we had in the book. But this isn't. There is a lot of proof that the Satanism comes through. The Army Handbook for Chaplains reportedly was changed because of Aquino's introduction into it of materials on the Church of Satan and the Temple of Set, and also very positive description of Satanism generally, in which Satanism to the chaplains is described as a pro-life religion.
Well, see, but the thing is, I myself would not practice Satanism, but I'm saying that I don't see how that should be grounds. You know what I'm saying? They're entitled to their religious beliefs, if that's a religion. But, I'm interested to find out how this interlaps or overlaps into, this research that he does. I mean, or not research, but the job that he does. You say we've got proof. What kind of proof do we have that, that this satanic thing is going on in the intelligence community? You can say mind control experimentation, which I think is heinous. I mean, it's just like it's as bad as talking about feeding, retarded children milk that's laced with plutonium or whatever. But how do these lap? I mean, how do these link together? Is there an agenda? Is there an agenda by these people? If there is an agenda, what is the agenda? What are they trying to accomplish?
Well, it's interesting. Aquino is also a big believer in revelations.
The biblical revelations?
Biblical revelations. In some of he signs his name to his followers, along with the priest of Marduk and high priest of Mendes and a few other things. He signs it and to the profane, which is our non-Satanists, the second beast of Revelations. He considers himself the second beast of Revelations. And in fact, I had to go back to Revelations and read it to realize that, in fact, there was a second beast. The first beast is the one that's brought back to life by the second beast, and he refers to Crowley, of course, as the first beast. So he has that agenda. There's some evidence that the whole agenda of the or belief in what's to come of the Temple of Set is that there will be a big catastrophe which will destroy most of the people on the earth, and there will be an elite who survive, and that elite is the Satanists.
I want you to hold that thought. I want to come back to that because that's interesting. You said that. We've heard someone talking about catastrophe. I guess it was Dr. Lewis last week talking about catastrophe theory and stuff like this. I want to focus on that, and I also want to talk about the Montauk Project, a little bit about that, what you have in your book, because that's an interesting linkage. I'm Michael Corbin. My guest in studio is Roy Blake, author of Objective Evil, Satanic Cults in the U.S. Intelligence Community. An interesting book. This is an interesting subject, very complex. 1-800-836-2009, 1-800-836-2009. I'm Michael Corbin, and you're listening to the Paranet Continuum. We'll be right back. We're going to give away one of our popular Paranet MyCap t-shirts at the end of the show tonight. So we're going to draw a name from people who have called or written in the last couple of weeks, and we're also taking your calls all during the show tonight. Call us at 1-800-836-2009. That's 1-800-836-2009. Give us your name and address. We'll put your name in the hat for a chance to win a Paranet t-shirt. Our winner last week was Jim Salentin of Rio Rancho, New Mexico. So give us a call at 1-800-836-2009 to get your name in there for a free Paranet t-shirt.
Pilots depend on accurate, timely information, both in the cockpit and on the ground. Skyway Publications helps with both. The Skyway Airport Directory and Entertainment Guide provides convenient, accurate information for safe flight and landing operations, as well as local businesses that cater to pilots. These are free, pocket-sized guides with information on large and small airports nationwide, along with technical information, fuel and airport services, and businesses that can make life easier for pilots. Keep in mind, it's free. Check your local airport for the Skyway Publications Airport Directory and Entertainment Guide, or call area 970-669-1800. Call Skyway today and find out how the guide can also be a financial opportunity for you. Skyway Publications, your ticket to safer, cheaper, and more convenient flight. Check your local airport or call Skyway at 970-669-1800.
The mystery of UFOs, strange lights in the sky, crashed saucers, alien abductions, secret military projects, government cover-ups, hoaxes, and frauds. We cover it all on the Paranet Continuum. Now back to your host, Michael Corbin.
And welcome back, my guest, Roy Blake, author of Objective Evil, Satanic Cults in U.S. Intelligence. And when we went to break, we were talking about the idea that there's a catastrophe coming. Can you expound on that a little bit? Talk about that. What does that mean?
Well, it's not defined, at least to the outside world, as much other than. But one of the ways that such a catastrophe could occur, other than of course polluting ourselves to death, might be a genetically engineered virus that say Satanists only have the vaccine for. And there is some evidence that there's a link between the new biological warfare research that's been occurring out at the Dugway Proving Ground and in Washington D.C. The rumors that there's a super flu due out of China. There's people that allege that AIDS was an early experiment. In fact, there is proof that came out in the church hearings that the Belgian Congo, at the time was Belgian Congo, was used as a testing ground for some army viruses during the MK Ultra, and one of the original targets was a guy who did end up being killed, one of the Congolese leaders. So that's one means. There are some others. There's this HARP. I don't know if you've heard about this HARP.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
That's
is
the high energy. How does it work? What is that?
Boy.
It's an atmospheric research project that's
Right.
going up in Alaska.
Yeah.
We've been hearing a lot about it lately.
Yeah, and it's really well connected with ELF waves. There's a number of things that could happen. What their real plans are, how if they plan to bring it about, or they just believe it's going to be brought about. That's not known. But the thing is that they believe that the network of themselves, the Satanists, the elite, will be the only ones with the knowledge and the power to survive it.
They sound like Christians too.
Yeah, there's a weird dichotomy. There's a strange dichotomy that the two groups seem to have a symbiotic relationship. A lot of people that leave Satanism turn to born again Christianity, and in fact, there's even televangelists who are supposedly secret Satanists as well. So.
Wow. I know that there's been a lot of discussion. For example, talk about him a lot too on the programs. Graham Hancock's book, Fingerprints of the Gods. Graham's whole theory is that we're heading towards some kind of a global cataclysm. Now, not necessarily a virus or a super virus or anything, but more of a geological catastrophe. And I'm kind of concerned. I'm not sure what you ascribe it to. I mean, there seems to be a lot of that. I turn on the television today, and you see a lot of discussion about end times. And, the thing is that when you start talking about some of this stuff, it makes you wonder how much of this is actually trumped up, not necessarily trumped up, but, there seems to be a big fear factor here.
Yeah, I think that the geological end of it is exaggerated. I don't see... There are ways that you can cause faults to slip, as we know here in Colorado. If you pump certain things
Sure.
down into faults, you can cause faults to slip. But I think that on its own, the tectonic plates don't move quickly enough to cause all these great earth changes that a lot of these so-called prophets foresee.
Now, what's the story on the Montauk Project?
Okay, the story on the Montauk Project, or at least the Montauk books. Now, I can't really swear to the authenticity of the Montauk Project, and there isn't really any proof that's presented in the Montauk books. Basically, it has to do with the Philadelphia experiment, although apparently as important to the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard was the Montauk base up on Long Island. Anyway, the authors of the Montauk book is an interesting thing. One of the authors is a fellow named Peter Moon, who's apparently very high up in the Church of Scientology. And again, that makes me worried to begin with. But there was a lot of good information in the book, and some information which I was able to use, particularly about the Babylon working, which was conducted by followers of Aleister Crowley. Now, the Babylon working was apparently fictionally represented in the movie Rosemary's Baby, which also has a cult. Anton LaVey of the Church of Satan was a technical advisor to Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby was called the biggest, was called the biggest advertisement for Satanism ever conducted.
It was a scary movie.
It was a scary movie. The Babylon working. L. Ron Hubbard apparently was one of the people that was involved in the Babylon working, was a person very close to Moon, as was Jack Parsons, founder of the Jet Propulsion Lab, possibly Robert Heinlein, another science fiction writer. It was to create an Antichrist. One of the reasons that Aquino claims his pedigree as Antichrist is that he was born exactly 9 months after the Babylon working, which was Aleister Crowley, who these people were followers of, in a group called the OTO, which is the Order Templi Orientis, which was believed the Knights Templars after they were mostly destroyed in France following the Crusades. They became a secret society, and some say a very satanic secret society. Crowley's main organization was the OTO, although he was also involved with groups such as the Golden Dawn. Many of the great authors, George Bernard Shaw, of the great English authors, was involved in the Golden Dawn. There's a history of the elites being involved in occultism and Satanism going way back. It was the Druidism and the witchcraft was called the old religion and was the real religion, supposedly of the English monarchs.
Okay. In about a minute now, we got to wrap up this segment, but in about a minute, where is your research going? What's after this book?
Well, I've got so much new information that there's obviously going to be a sequel to the book. It's right now it's going in so many different directions that it's hard to pin it down. Okay. So it won't be out for a while. All I can say is I think that this book would be a good primer, and I find it was a terribly tough thing for me to imagine that all these things can exist in going through it, and it's going to be even tougher the new information that I'm coming up with.
Okay. All right. I'm Michael Corbin, and you're listening to the Paranet Continuum. We'll be right back.
There are many magazines about UFOs. Continuum is different. Continuum is the official quarterly publication of Paranet and MyCap, and is the outgrowth of Paranet's worldwide communications network on paranormal phenomena. It's in-depth, challenging, and above all, fascinating. It takes a straight-ahead, no-nonsense look at UFOs, worldwide sighting reports, parapsychology, abduction phenomena, futuristic science, and much, much more. You can get Continuum for just $18 a year. Continuum is also available by fax for a small additional fee. Be informed. Call now and subscribe to Continuum. Call 1-800-UFO-NET-1. That's 1-800-836-6381. Continuum, published by Paranet Information Services and MyCap. Order yours today at 1-800-UFO-NET-1. Continuum, one of the most fascinating magazines you'll ever read.
Grab a pen and get ready to copy down a computer address. It's an email address where you can reach the Paranet Information Services BBS through America Online. With America Online's Internet Gateway, you can send us mail and we can respond to you personally through your America Online screen name. With America Online's Usenet Newsgroup tie-in, you can also access the 7 Paranet newsgroups dealing with UFOs, metaphysics, paranormal activity, and others. Learn about our upcoming shows and pose questions in advance. And if your question is selected, you'll get a free cassette copy of the show. You'll also find summaries of past shows. If you're not already a customer of America Online, call 1-800-827-6364 for more information. Now, here's that email address to reach us. It's paranet@aol.com or paranet@paranet.org. America Online and Paranet, a winning combination.
Now here's your host, Michael Corbin.
And good evening and welcome to this edition of the program tonight. We're going to explore the psychology of government secrecy. Is there an underlying motive behind the intense curtain of secrecy surrounding UFOs? And if so, what is it? Well, my guest tonight is going to discuss more specifically the psychology of dreamland, how secrecy is destroying public faith in government and science. Now, that's the title of a paper that he wrote and is published on the World Wide Web. Perhaps no location in the United States has generated more discussion than the super-secret test site known as Area 51, northwest of Nellis Air Force Base near Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, it's claimed by some that the government is conducting bizarre tests with out-of-this-world technology up there. We're going to explore these claims, and we're also going to be joined possibly, it's tentative, but we might be joined later in the hour by our resident in-house psychologist, Dr. Greg Wheeler, who's going to have some interesting perspectives as well to offer on this discussion. But before we go to that, I want to mention, has any one of you out there read Stan Friedman's latest book, Top Secret Magic? Well, if you haven't, it might be worth the trouble. This book, it centers on 10-year-plus controversy over the alleged documents called MJ-12 documents that were received in a very clandestine fashion by Hollywood producer Jamie Chandray and UFO researcher Bill Moore back in 1984. That this film was in a brown envelope that when they exposed it, it contained these documents that have been dubbed the MJ-12 papers. These documents claim that there was a group, a super secret group that was set up called Majestic 12 by the government in 1947 following the crash of the UFO, I believe it was, at Roswell. What's really interesting about this book, though, is that Stan Friedman, as many of you know out there, Stan Friedman is an internationally known UFO lecturer who has, been the big proponent of what he calls the Cosmic Watergate, the government's 49-year cover-up of real flying saucer mystery. But what's really interesting, and something we're going to talk about tonight in the program, concerns, secrecy and the cover-up itself. There's a paragraph, actually a couple of paragraphs in the book that I found very interesting, and I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it's an interesting thing to ponder. It makes you wonder just what the cover-up really is consisting of. For example, are we dealing with something that is a cover-up with the American people only, and maybe the scientific insiders have considerable knowledge about the science behind UFOs? This quote that I'm going to read you is on page 12 of the book. And keep in mind, this is Stan's beginning, kind of his beginning journey into the study of UFOs, and this goes back many years. But he was about to quit a job or lose a job due to government layoffs. He was a nuclear physicist, and he was working on some high-tech nuclear rocket motors and that type of thing. And he thought it was a great opportunity opened up for him when he went to work for McDonnell Douglas in Santa Monica, California, under Dr. Robert Wood, who was a scientist who had a long-time interest in UFOs. Now, one of his people, Dr. Robert Wood's people, had heard a talk that Stan gave at the Washington Research Laboratory and recommended that Stan go to work trying to back-engineer flying saucers using some blue sky and what Stan calls far-out thinking funds available through the Manned Orbiting Laboratory program at McDonnell Douglas. Stan says, I packed up a bunch of furniture, clothes, and household goods and headed across the country. Now, when he got there, apparently they were laying off people, and they still hired him. They were laying off 5,000 people at McDonnell Douglas. They hired him anyway, and he says, even so, they honored his contract and let him stay there for 3 months. I researched magneto-aerodynamic propulsion systems, similar in principle to an electromagnetic submarine developed by a Westinghouse scientist, that might explain the hypermaneuverability of flying saucers and their ability to overcome the obvious problems of heating, drag, sonic boom production, and reduced radar cross-sections. I found references to hundreds of papers in the mostly non-academic literature. The great majority were classified, indicating the government was certainly interested in such technology. My 3-month stay at McDonnell Douglas was followed by 6 months at TRW Systems. Keep in mind, too, TRW is Dan Golden's group, where he came from, who is now the director of NASA, where I worked on the Pioneer spacecraft that have now left the solar system. When the contract ended, I was back full-time on the lecture circuit. Except for consulting work, I was finished with industry for good and became the only space scientist known to devote full-time to ufology. Now, again, I might be reading too much into this, but it sounds to me like, from what Stan is saying here, that there are certain scientific insiders who have a greater knowledge than we are realizing about, the technology that's behind UFOs and that type of thing, and even alludes to the idea that they're back engineering this stuff. And this kind of brings us to my guest tonight, because one of the stories that you hear, in 1989, Area 51 became famous, if you will, when a character named Robert Lazar told the public that he had worked out there at the test site and had worked on some pretty exotic technology that had to do with extraterrestrial spacecraft. Now, over the time, according to even Stan Friedman claims that he has been unable to verify the veracity of Lazar's story. And of course, Lazar has been very elusive and evasive about, different aspects of his involvement out there. Nevertheless, there have been some interesting films that have been made, photographs taken and films made of some very unusual aircraft flying around out there at Area 51 in Nevada. And of course, over the years, this controversy has been a hot topic, whether or not the government is involved in either alien technology, or are they back engineering something that might have been recovered in a crash? It's anybody's guess. Now, my guest tonight is Terry Hansen. And Terry has been involved or interested in UFOs since the late 60s. He's written a couple of papers on the controversy over UFOs. He's even done a documentary for National Public Radio. He's currently the editor of the Puget Sound Computer User Magazine and also Cybernautics Digest. And it's my pleasure to welcome to the program tonight Terry Hansen. Good evening, Terry.
Good evening, Michael.
Thanks for being on the program. Now, this paper that you wrote is called The Psychology of Dreamland, How Secrecy is Destroying Public Faith in Government and Science. Before we go to our first break, give us a real quick thumbnail sketch of the paper.
Okay. What I tried to do in this article was, it's really written for people who are relative newcomers to the subject of UFOs who may feel that the whole subject is really nonsense and that there's no real substantial issues to be concerned about. And I tried to take people from I used the Area 51 controversy as a kind of jumping off point into the broader issues that this phenomenon raises for society and for science as well. And I kind of conclude by saying that science has sort of sold out. The traditional role of science, the role of science that the public is given in high school and college, is that science is an open inquiry into the nature of human experience.
Right.
And the point I try to make in this article is that in reality that just isn't the case. There's certain types of information that can be disseminated openly, but there are obviously other areas of knowledge that human beings, the average American citizen just doesn't have access to.
Right.
And the reason for that is, national security, as the people in the intelligence community define that.
I think it's more political, but we're going to get into that. And welcome back my guest from Seattle, Washington, Terry Hansen. He is the author of a paper that has been published on the World Wide Web. And later in the hour, I'm going to tell you how you can get access to it with a computer and a modem and your internet service provider. And but in the meantime, Terry, welcome back to the program.
I'm glad to be here.
Now, before we go too much further, for our new listeners and for people who may not know what Area 51 is, give us a little summary of what Area 51 is and why is it so controversial.
Okay, well, there's a large area of land in Nevada, northeast of Las Vegas, which the government has used for many decades to test all types of military technologies, everything from nuclear warheads to spy planes. Area 51 is a small part of this large complex, and it's kind of in the eastern part north of Las Vegas. And this is where the Air Force tested the SR-71 and the U-2 and a number of other classified aircraft that have since become public knowledge. About 1984, something unusual happened there. The Air Force seized about 89,000 acres of public land with no explanation. They just took it illegally. And they were hauled before Congress to testify why they did this, and they weren't. They said, "Well, we can't tell you." So it was a very mysterious event that occurred there. Some years later, about March 1989, as you mentioned earlier, there was a guy named Bob Lazar interviewed on KLAS television in Las Vegas who claimed that he had actually worked on and seen operating basically flying saucers, alien technology.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And this, of course, added to the general controversy and mystique of the whole area, and it brought large numbers of people as well as many film crews and reporters and journalists to the area. The Air Force, in order to keep these people from seeing what was going on at the base, apparently, decided that it had to take some additional land out of the public domain because there were a couple of mountain peaks, Whitesides Mountain and Freedom Ridge, as it was dubbed, from which you could still see the base while being on public land. And the Air Force didn't want that going on, so they applied to the Interior Department, and it was taken out of the public domain, I think, earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
There have been a number of stories and myths and so forth surrounding what's been going on there, and you can sort of decide for yourself what you want to believe. Some people say that it's really all about the fact that the Air Force has been dumping some extremely toxic material illegally on the base, and that's what they're trying to protect themselves from. They don't want to be culpable to a lawsuit if it becomes public knowledge that they've been doing these highly illegal activities. And the other story, which is much more sensational, of course, is that there really is alien technology being tested in that area. So you can kind of decide what you want to believe. Now, as far as the alien technology story, there are many reasons for believing that might be the case. I mentioned to your producer earlier that astronaut Ed Mitchell recently publicly stated that he had talked to a number of people with very good connections in the government who confirmed to him that indeed is what's happening there. So now, is this really what's happening, or is it part of some kind of elaborate disinformation scheme?
Right. Can we take Ed Mitchell's word for it as well?
Yeah, I mean, good question.
Right.
The only way to really know would be if you could say as a journalist, well, let me go look. And of course you can't do that.
Sure, no.
They won't let you in there.
That's the beauty of the whole mystery, is that it's...
Another interesting thing, I get a newsletter called the Secrecy in Government Bulletin, which is published by the Federation of American Scientists. And that's an organization that has been attempting to reduce the amount of secrecy in the world of science. And they report on a program called Inside Edition, where Air Force Secretary Sheila Widnall was asked whether the government is using technology from captured UFOs in its secret aircraft programs. And she didn't say no. She rebuffed the question. She said, I'm not even going to discuss it. So what does that mean? That's not a no, it's not a yes, but it's not,
right.
She didn't deny it. So, there are many reasons like this, and they all kind of point in the same direction, that maybe indeed there really is something going on.
Now, at this point, I want to kind of go into a couple of different aspects that are very fascinating. One of them, and I know that you have had an interest in this for many years, and you've done an exceedingly good job, I think, in your paper of pointing out some of these interesting connections. But one of the things that we've talked about before on this program goes back to the early 1950s, when there appears to have been a decision made by the government, whoever that is that represents the government, that the UFO problem, in other words, you can distinctly, by the Robertson panel in 1952, you can see where there was a definite split or a fork in the road, where the scientific aspect of this was basically shoved away completely out of sight, out of mind. And UFOs, according to the government, became an intelligence problem.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because one of the things that I'm real excited about doing this program is that we're talking about a sociological angle. Okay, what could really be going on here in the vein of, say, psychological warfare or manipulation of the American public? And I noticed that in your article at the first page, you talk about these maps that are available. And the kind of thing that you surmise from that.
Yeah, it's quite clear that if you look at the maps of Area 51, historically, there's a certain point where this base, which was on maps at one point, simply disappeared off the maps. It just vanished. The government agencies that are responsible for drawing maps apparently were told or asked not to include the information about the base. Now, you could say, well, they're doing that because they don't want the Soviets to know about the base, but that's ridiculous, because the Soviets fly satellites over all the time. They know about the base. They've known about it for many decades, and everyone else does too. It's kind of public knowledge in the intelligence community that base exists. So what it suggests to me is that they're really not concerned about the Soviets or other military powers. What they're concerned about is the American public. They don't want the American public to know what they're doing there.
What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that they're probably very concerned that if the public kind of gets its teeth into this, or if the journalistic community begins to dig into it, they're going to find some rather surprising and maybe shocking things. And one of them may be that there is a fairly large-scale program going on that's off the budget, and that a lot of illegal funds have been being diverted into this type of activity.
Could this activity not include extraterrestrials? Are you talking about maybe just exotic technologies?
Well, it could include a whole range of things. Extraterrestrial technology might be one of them, but it might be all sorts of other things as well that they just don't want the American public to know about.
Okay, this is Terry Hansen. Terry, we've been talking now about the intelligence factor here. What is your research uncovered, and I want to explore what your feeling is about why and what they're up to. What are they doing? Why are they doing this?
Well, I think in my judgment, there are probably two principal objectives that the intelligence community is involved with UFOs. One is probably technological. In other words, they want to learn as much as they can about how UFOs operate, where they come from, and so forth, so that they can apply this for military applications. Obviously, if you can figure out how to do the kinds of things that UFOs are reported to do, you'd have some pretty impressive weapons technology, and you'd pretty much rule the planet.
Right.
But another aspect of this is that I think the government is extremely concerned about the psychological impact of public acceptance that various forms of very sophisticated intelligence are not only here, but are deeply involved in our affairs in various ways. And there are lots of reasons to reach this conclusion, but I want to kind of quote a little article by Victor Marchetti, who wrote a book with John Marks called The CIA and the Cult of Intelligence. And Victor Marchetti was a former executive assistant to the deputy director of the CIA. He said, this was 1979, that we have indeed been contacted by extraterrestrial beings, and the U.S. government, in collusion with other national powers of the earth, is determined to keep this information from the general public. The purpose of the international conspiracy is to maintain a workable stability among the nations of the world, and for them, in turn, to retain institutional control over their respective populations. Thus, for these governments to admit that there are beings from outer space with mentalities and technological capabilities obviously far superior to ours could, once fully perceived by the average person, erode the legal foundations, religious, economic, and social institutions. So, the issue there is that it's very much like the Catholic Church in the time of Galileo and the Scientific Revolution. The Catholic Church maintained its political power by controlling what people believed. As long as people believed that the Catholic Church knew what was going on and was in control of the situation, things functioned fine. The status quo was maintained. But once the scientific revolution got started and began to question the assumptions that the public had up until that time, it began to erode the power and influence of the Catholic Church. And I think this is really what the issue is about UFOs to a large extent. I think the government, not only in this country but other countries as well, have decided, whether it's legitimate or not, that this information can't be officially acknowledged. Otherwise it will destabilize our society.
That brings us to a question then. What we perceive in the public sector, people like us in the public sector and my listeners and people in the, just people out there, what does that tell us about what we know? Do we know anything, or is this just all smoke?
Well, I think we do know some things, but clearly our view of reality is filtered through the media to a large extent.
So they're shaping it.
Yes, absolutely. And this is not. I mean, people are kind of led to believe that the media is like a mirror. It's just reflecting what's going on. In fact, the media is managed to a large extent by a variety of forces, corporations, government. Some types of information is disseminated, some types of information are kept under wraps. So I think the government really is kind of engaging in what you might call a reality management exercise here. When UFOs first became publicly known in the mass media about 50 years ago with the Kenneth Arnold sighting, it became a problem for the intelligence community, and they began to take a look at this, and they realized that whatever was going on, they wanted to keep it out of the press as much as possible. And the Robertson panel, which was CIA's one of the organizations the CIA set up to deal with this problem, decided that this problem had to be managed through what they called a program of covert debunking and training. and it kind of had a number of different aspects, but one of them was to keep UFOs out of the press as much as possible, and the second was to provide an explanation, a sort of prosaic explanation to every sighting that came up.
Now, NICAP, which was the premier group, I think, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, which was made famous, I guess, by Donald Kehoe, was, in fact, a group that was penetrated, or if you can call it that, I think that was sort of probably appropriate terminology, was penetrated by these intelligence types.
Yes.
And they ultimately destroyed the organization.
Well, it certainly looks that way. I mean, it's pretty obvious that there were a very large number of CIA people in NICAP, and not just, low-ranking personnel, but very highly placed people going all the way up to the leadership of the Central Intelligence Agency. So this is kind of interesting. I mean, here you have an organization that the government is trying to tell us, well, UFOs really aren't very important, but yet it's quite obvious that they're important to somebody in the Central Intelligence Agency because they had all these people infiltrating the NICAP organization, and it rapidly went downhill from there. And the only other time, well, there was one other major attempt to get government-sponsored investigation into the UFO phenomenon, and that was the Condon Commission. Well, Edward Condon was also a guy who had very close ties to the intelligence community. He was, involved in the Manhattan Project, and he was basically, a team player. So, as you begin to look into this further and further, you find that all of the people who are out there active in the media making statements about UFOs have some type of intelligence community connection. And it's pretty clear that there's, a pattern begins to emerge, that this, the information is being actively managed by the intelligence community.
What is I guess, this knife cuts both ways, if you will. What's the downside? I mean, I think that's becoming apparent to most people, but the downside of giving someone that much power. For example, the whole notion that in '47, when the National Security Act was brought into action, that basically gave the people within the government carte blanche to make decisions for us. What do you see as a problem with that? I mean, I myself personally find it very troublesome.
Well, I think, I think that it's been counterproductive as far as the government goes. I think the government instituted these policies of secrecy probably with somewhat good intentions. In other words, they basically didn't want society to come apart at the seams and chaos to reign. And so acting out of fear, they began to adopt kind of totalitarian principles, and they began to abandon the democratic open society that we had prior to about 1947. And I think that this has really led to a widespread and very profound distrust of government, which you see manifested in all sorts of ways in our society today.
Okay. All right. I agree with you on that. The thing is that, I can see also other things that might, fall into place with that. But one of the things that sticks out in my mind the most is the fact that one of the concerns that they had early on with the listening projects, the forerunner of SETI was Project Ozma. I guess a lot of papers were generated by scientific people who said, maybe we don't want to listen to this stuff. Maybe, we might be dealing with espionage from an intelligence that is outside of the realm of human intelligence. These are factors that could be possibly at play in all of this.
Yeah, I once interviewed John Billingham, who was, I don't know what his exact title was, I think it was director of the SETI project, NASA's SETI project at the time. And I asked him, after asking him a lot of questions about SETI, I asked him, well, John, what is going to happen if you're successful? I mean, do you really honestly believe that if you obtain highly sophisticated, technologically advanced information, that you're going to be able to publish this in the open literature? And he became extremely defensive at that point. And he just, he said, look, this is just a small project. We're just trying, he realized that I was touching on a very sensitive point, and that is that knowledge always has a political dimension to it. You see this very well in the problem of nuclear proliferation. We can't simply allow everyone in the world to have nuclear weapons. I mean, it's, high-powered rifles are bad enough. So, as we become more and more sophisticated and knowledgeable with science and technology, it becomes more and more of a threat to society in general and our everyday health.
Right. Terry Hansen, we're talking about the psychology of dreamland. Also joining us now from California is MyCap, our sister organization's resident psychologist, Dr. Greg Wheeler. Good evening, Greg.
Hi, Mike.
Thanks for being on the program with us. And,
you're welcome.
You're on here with us with Terry Hansen as well. Terry.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, Terry. It's a pleasure to talk with you. I greatly respect your Dreamland article. It was really fascinating and great listening to you.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Now, Greg, the question I have for you is this, and we've been talking about the psychology of secrecy, in essence, and one of the things that I'm kind of concerned about is essentially, what is your take as a psychologist on this type of activity, concerning the secrecy, how they're doing it, the manipulation, apparently, of all of our world views, if you will, and do you think we could handle the revelation that there's an extraterrestrial intelligence here?
Well, I've been listening for some time to Terry's what he was saying and what you guys were talking about, and I think that the principal problem that the current policies generate is massive paranoia. I think that Oklahoma City is sort of an example of paranoia at its most extreme. The government is not only the enemy, but is to be destroyed. I think that policy is very, very bad as it results in such activities. I think there's a better way. I think basically, if the justification for mass secrecy is a study done in 1960 or 61, the Brookings Institute study has been talked a lot about, would massive societal changes would result. I think that is way out of date. Since that time, we've landed on the moon. There's been, Star Trek, Star Wars, aliens, etc. I think public consciousness is really much further along.
Well, the question I have with that respect is that can they possibly be that remiss in their assessment? Surely they are reassessing or reevaluating, as they're going along. My question is, does this not lay some groundwork for some very dangerous mixtures of, say, for example, as we've talked about or heard before, rogue activities and that type of thing?
Yeah, I really do. And, I think that I was thinking of a phrase while Terry was talking, and kind of if the government position were this, were one of keeping this degree of secrecy, it would be kind of like societal agoraphobia. We cannot look outside the window. We can't go outside the window. We have to stay inside and pretend that it'll all go away. I don't think that's going to happen. We've got to deal with it. We need strategies, coping strategies for facing the prospect of eventual first contact. I don't think it's just fiction. All the cosmology that I'm aware of indicates, and with the Mars revelation of maybe ancient life on Mars, I think we're probably in an inhabited galaxy. And first contact is doubtless going to happen. We need some way to deal with it as a society, and it's time for, perhaps even a science of first contact.
Okay, Terry, I'm curious now in your work. When you were working on this notion of the secrecy and that type of thing, what do you see as far as maybe the perceived intentions of an alien civilization as the government might see it?
My opinion is that there probably are a number of different alien civilizations interested in us for various reasons, and it could be that some of the activities are genuinely frightening. In other words, some of them may be hostile to us, or they may be attempting to manipulate us in some very sophisticated manner. And if the government either believes this is the case or suspects it to be the case, I think that they might, this might explain their extreme reluctance to acknowledge that this kind of thing even exists, even though public opinion polls show that the public already accepts it. So there could be a real dark side, and that could account for the extreme secrecy that the government is manifesting. I'm
curious, does any of you gentlemen have a comment on this aspect of it? What do you see as we're seeing in the public eye a lot of experts, so-called experts, that come out in the field and say, Well, for example, at the top of the program, I was quoting out of Stan Friedman's latest book, Top Secret Magic. The notion for me here is that we see a lot of what I call the woo-woo factor in this. The blending of the New Age kind of thinking, the Space Brothers are here. Do you see that any of those types, manifestations of groups and things like that, that do have the ability to manipulate the public's view of things? Do you see any of those as maybe having a connection to the murky world of intelligence?
Well, I can take a shot at that, and maybe Greg can comment on it.
Sure.
I think that there certainly are elements in the intelligence community that are very interested in mind control and behavior control of human beings through psychological warfare and psychological manipulation. And there could be U.S. government agencies that have an interest in this, or there could be, splinter organizations that have found a way to capitalize on this type of thing. So, yeah, that's a real possibility.
Part of this is, it brings up the question of why have a private UFO investigatory organization like MICAP or Paranet. And I go back to the Copernican revolution. It's really it's instructive to kind of think that the church was trying to control the information flow, but it couldn't control the information source. Kepler, Copernicus, Galileo, they all just worked on their own. Galileo just turned the right observational tool on the moon and on Jupiter, and he found out the truth for himself. Much of the UFO data is already public. I mean, people are reporting these things every day. I feel that our organizations like MICAP and like Paranet, the goal is to develop our own methods so that we can arrive at a conclusion. If we have been contacted, it should be something that everyone knows about at the same time, publicly declared. Then, we can decide how to handle it individually if we haven't talked about it publicly. But I feel there's a real purpose for private investigation. And, Terry's work, obviously, is part of that.
Okay. Terry, in about a minute, we need to wrap this up. It's been a very fascinating program. Where do we go from here with all this stuff?
Well, ideally, I think that it would be good if the government had a period of glasnost. And now that the Cold War is over, I think there are a lot of things that have been covered up that probably should be revealed, and that would at least partially restore some of the respect that the public has for government and science as well. But I think they have a real dilemma here. There certainly are aspects of this that are dangerous for the public to know about. I mean, technologies that might be very disruptive to the global political status quo and so forth. So it's kind of a hot potato for the government. I can understand why they're having difficulty with it.
Greg, you got any comments you want to make?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think the paradigm of the past is that when subjects were given psychedelics unbeknownst to them and were treated as without the knowledge of what happened to them, it was extremely destructive. And I think that if, for example, abductees were being abducted, that it would help everyone concerned for them to know about it rather than to be looked at as having some kind of other problem. And I just feel like secrecy in any guise, even if it's thought of as necessary, just isn't helpful in this area at all.
Okay. Guys, thank you very much, and I'm afraid that's the last word on it tonight. It's been a pleasure having both of you on. My guest again is Terry Hansen and Dr. Greg Wheeler. We're talking about the psychology of dreamland.
Okay, good evening. What do alien abductions, mind control, ritual abuse, Satanism all have in common? Well, this question and more will be the topic of discussion tonight on this edition of the Paranet UFO Continuum. I'm Michael Corbin, and welcome to the program this evening. Tonight, my guest is going to talk about all of these subjects, and it's going to probably shock a lot of you concerning what he has discovered. In March of this year, he attended a conference in Dallas, Texas, and this conference was attended by people from the psychiatric community, psychologists, psychiatrists, law enforcement people, and people who have reported incidents of ritual abuse, as well as satanic abuse. So we are going to be talking with him tonight about that subject. My guest has been on the program before. He is the author of a book that has been very popular for the last 20 years. It's called Operation Mind Control.
He was awarded the McMahon Scholarship in Journalism from the University of Oklahoma. In 1965, he founded the New York weekly, The East Village Other. That same year, he founded the Underground Press Syndicate. It quickly grew to include 200 papers around the world and millions of readers. Now, since that time, he has edited the Aspen Daily News, the Port Townsend Daily News, and the Palm Springs Life magazine. He has written numerous articles and books. He's founder and advisor of the new Freedom of Thought Foundation, which we are going to talk about at some length tonight. He's presently making a film based on a book that he is publishing, and the book that he is publishing is called Operation Mind Control. Now, this is an expanded and corrected version of the previously published book, and the subtitle is The Cryptocracy's Plan to Psycho-Civilize You. With that in mind, let me welcome my guest this evening. It is Walter Bauert. Good evening, Walter. How are you?
Good evening, Michael, and cryptocracy is a pretty big word.
Especially when you got peanut butter in your mouth like me.
It's really a simple word made up of a prefix and a suffix. Crypto meaning secret, and ocracy of or pertaining to government. So it just means secret government.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, now, this is going to be quite a program tonight we're going to be covering, because I think a lot of my listeners in the audience will, a lot of them are familiar with what alien abductions are. And, I know over the years, a lot of people have advanced the theory that there is a possibility that extraterrestrial intelligence has been coming to the Earth and has been taking people out of their beds or their cars and performing all kinds of heinous genetic-type experimentation on these people. However, there's also that other element that we are seeing cropping up here and there that has to do with mind control, i.e. mind control either by the government or by this non-human intelligence. Tell us a little bit about mind control and your background and how you got involved in this.
Well, as I've repeated so many times for 20 years, a very dear friend of mine that I grew up with went off to serve his country in Vietnam, and he came back with hyperamnesia, which is a vastly improved short-term memory where he didn't have to take any notes in medical school, for example. And yet he had amnesia. His sister would say, remember the time that you and I and Grandpa went fishing when we were 15 or something, and he wouldn't remember that. It was a very curious thing. He couldn't get a job. Every time somebody said, what'd you do in the last 5 years, he would have a claustrophobic reaction. His palms would sweat, his heart would beat rapidly, and he would feel compelled to leave the room and get some fresh air. This hampered him both getting a job and in school, because the question came up when he had to talk in front of a psychology class. He had to address the class about his last 5 years, and he couldn't do it. He knew that was the beginning when he knew that the things that he had suffered in the military were plaguing him in civilian life. In the military, after he got in the Air Force, he was in a few months, when he was hospitalized. And they told him that he had taken an overdose of sleep ease, which is a patented medicine, and tried to commit suicide, which is a silly thing to do. Sleep ease will not kill you. Mm-hmm. And it's you could probably take a carload full. It'd probably make you sick, but it wouldn't affect you very much. Anyway, he never believed that. So when he got home on his first leave, he told his mother that he had been picked for intelligence and that he was a special guy, one of the chosen few, Anyway, I began to do research on this, and I've been off on this trip for 20-odd years now.
Okay, now, Walter, in your research, what is mind control? I know we've got notions of what it is, but as much research as you've done on this, define it for us.
Okay, well, the way I use it in the book, there's a thing called Silva mind control, which is apparently a beneficial process. So we don't mean that. We mean the use of technology, drugs, hypnosis, electronic brain stimulation, one form of non-ionizing radiation or another, to affect your mind and to take over and make you do something against your will and without your knowledge. This thing about will and knowledge is very important. It's a violation of your most private rights, the right of freedom of thought. And that's what we mean by mind control. And it started out way back when, and including my friend, though I didn't know it at the time. His father had abused him and his sisters. He had a drinking problem. He would get drunk. He would beat up the family. Very common thing in America. Also a very common thing in military families. From traumatized children come multiple personality disorders. When the trauma is great, a young child will dissociate, especially if they are a bright and gifted young child and sensitive. They will dissociate in order to survive. They will create an entirely different personality, sort of crawl out on a ledge in their own mind, and then that personality, if a programmer is involved, they will be given a name, that personality will be developed, and if not, they will just be highly dissociative, which shows up in their Minnesota multiphasic personality test and all these other tests called CUMES, this person told me, the first guy I interviewed. Anyway, he was one of those guys that had dissociated, and it showed up, and the Air Force said, aha, here's somebody we can use. He had the Air Force number in the military, it's called the MOS in the Army, AFOS or something like that, of a box pusher in a supply warehouse. He actually lived like a king during his 4 years of service, traveling all over Southeast Asia, showing up to hotel rooms where he would sometimes stay 5 days, enjoying the tropical sunsets until somebody showed up and he'd say nose rose or some audio reversal type cue, and out would spill this coded information, which was gibberish, and which he remembered as gibberish, with code. And he was a courier. He was also a witness who could remember with this vastly improved memory that is so common with multiple personality disordered people. At the time, I think there were probably 8 or 10 or maybe 20 people in the world diagnosed with multiple personality disorder. Yet it had been a fact for hundreds of years, especially in German families, that children had been dissociated, traumatized, and then sold as these, what would you call them?
Slaves.
Mind control slaves.
Yeah.
In Bantu countries, they did this for centuries. They called them tokoloshis.
And welcome back. My guest tonight is Walter Bauer. He is the author of Operation Mind Control. He is also the founder of the Freedom of Thought Foundation. And we're talking tonight about the alien abductions and mind control aspect and how it might connect to ritual abuse and Satanism. And this information is quite graphic. We're going to be talking about tonight. So I want to advise you of that. The information is shocking and it's quite disturbing because I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of this coming up in the research papers, having to do with an unusual dark connection to covert military intelligence, and among that, as one aspect of it, and among others, including Satanism. Welcome back, Walter.
Thank you, Michael. Can you have your engineer turn this your sound up a little bit? I can barely hear you.
Okay. Now, for those of you out there that would like to call and talk to Walter, our number is 1-800-836-2009. That's 1-800-UFO-2009. Walter, now let's discuss this conference that you attended in March of this year.
Right.
Give us a little background about the conference and why it was called.
Well, it's the first time that anything like this has happened, but it's not the last. There are now 4 more in the planning stages by different groups. It was a group against ritual abuse of children that had noticed the thing that we're going to talk about tonight, that there's a pattern being reported from the victims or survivors. And the group was called the Society for the Investigation, Treatment, and Prevention of Ritual and Cult Abuse, and it's situated in Richardson, Texas, and headed up by a lady named Pam Perskin. The official title of the conference was Cult and Ritual Abuse, Trauma-Based Mind Control, and Dissociation, a Multidisciplinary Dialogue and Educational Symposium. And you introduced it correctly when you said it was a gathering of psychologists, psychiatrists, survivors, as well as law enforcement personnel and others, just a number of writers, among them Alan Shefflin, a lawyer who's the author of The Mind Manipulators, and a fine book called Trance on Trial. And it was the first time that people of this wide, many varied disciplines could get together and exchange ideas. And out of that came a consensus of opinion that the ritual abuse phenomenon and the alien abduction phenomenon fit very well into the mind control descriptions of the victims.
Now, Walter, the thing is that will not be consistent, will it, throughout the entire set of data for alien abductions? Well,
let's run this down. I have the data here in front of me.
Okay, all right.
Okay, a comparison of similar and dissimilar alien abduction and ritual survivor accounts by category. I'll just name a few. I'll just name a few that's off the top because it's a long list. But let's start with elements, inanimate. The alien abduction accounts, they have an examining table. Ritual survivor accounts have an altar table. Alien, white sheet. Ritual, white sheet, and a black rug. Alien machines, X-ray, headgears, wires, body fluid, collecting devices of sperm and blood. Ritual machines, ECT, polygraph, shockers, headgear, wired, cattle prods, instruments, alien abduction instruments, surgical needles, implant instruments, and ritual survival instruments, knives, daggers, pins, and needles. Symbols of the alien abduction people, new space writing and different symbols, and the ritual people's symbols, old writing symbols, letters, numbers, religious, upside down, and many of them are the same and they resemble each other. And it goes on. I mean, the eyes, both eyes are scary and calming. Okay, then the next category, elements, animate. The alien abduction people report being in charge, others subservient. The ritual survivors report high priest or priestess in charge, and others are subservient. The aliens, extraterrestrials, and humanoids are reported. Satanists, cultists, and humans. Alien people report reptilian creatures, and the ritual people report beast, reptilian creatures, cartoon characters too. Both of them report men in black, and both of them report shadows in the mind, for example. All of these things are not identical, but there's enough that are identical to really make the things that are different worth discussing. The message is given. The alien abduction people are told, you are special, we will return, do not tell, aliens are in charge, we want to breed with you. And the ritual survivors are told, you are special, we will return, do not tell, Satan is more powerful than God, and they are forced to breed. The psychological sequel, the alien abduction accounts amnestic for the experience. They have memory loss, enforced use of light instruments, etc. The ritual survivor accounts amnestic for experience, memory loss, enforced brainwashing techniques, and drugs. The alien abduction has bonding with the alien. The ritual abuse has bonding with the cult, is coerced. The alien abduction people have a feeling of euphoria and seem as if they're anesthetized or drugged, and the ritual people are drugged with LSD and nectine, curare, atropine, alcohol, belladonna, heroin, cocaine, roots, and herbs have been described. And it goes on. There's a vast, long thing, including locations for the experience, the personal history, the timetable, the wounds and scars observed, the violations against the free will, the philosophy and the beliefs, patterns of the abductions and the survivor accounts fit nicely. The comparison of similar and dissimilar alien abduction and ritual survivor accounts then is listed by category, and it goes on for It's at the back of, it's in the appendix of Operation Mind Control.
Okay. Now, hold that. We'll go to break.
Okay.
But when we come back, I want to get into this, the how and the why of this. This is quite a bit of shocking material, and we want to find out, the how and the why, and I think that will probably be as startling to all of you out there as the rest of this so far has been, and it's quite interesting that it's supported by the psychiatric community, law enforcement community. And as I understand it, Walter, these people that you have conversed with at these meetings have not been subjected to UFO investigators as of yet, but they're telling the same stories.
That's true. The common hidden agenda here in the mind control realm, in the ritual abuse realm, because the therapists have said this will discredit you. Nobody will believe you if you tell that alien story.
Okay.
It's widely experienced, the alien abduction thing, among the ritual survivors.
Okay, my guest is Walter Bauert. He's the author of Operation Mind Control, and this is a now expanded and corrected version, which he is putting out from the original published work about 20 years ago. And I think it's interesting to note that the book has not lost any of its timeliness. We're seeing all kinds of interesting things coming out in the major press about things that the government has withheld from the public, i.e. nuclear experimentations and different things like that. This book continues to, I think, have a definite place in the contemporary media and the time. Welcome back, Walter.
Thank you, Michael, and I'm glad you mentioned that thing about the radiation hearing. The President's Commission on Radiation heard 3 witnesses that reported the same doctors who experimented on them with radiation, Dr. Martin Orne, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, Dr. L. Wilson Green. There were no others that they also named, but these 3 doctors were the same doctors that were involved in the CIA's MK-Ultra mind control program.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, again, these things are starting
Have you heard that in the news anywhere? I'd like to hear from anybody that has heard that reported anywhere.
Okay, give us a call if you have. Now, Walter, let me get back to this conference you attended. Now, what are you saying here? Are you saying that there is and let me ask you this kind of like systematically here.
Yeah.
Number one, are you saying that there's a possibility that there could be interaction with these people from a non-human intelligence that might be utilizing satanic or other type human agencies to affect a cause or an agenda? Or are we looking at something that is completely born out of a human agenda?
Well, I don't know. It's like saying which came first, the chicken or the egg,
Yeah. Do you believe that...
It could be any of the above, or all of the above, or none of the above, for that matter. All we can do is look at the evidence, and the evidence makes the alien abduction phenomenon so similar to the ritual abuse phenomenon that, and it fits into the mind control category. Now, we know that Dr. Persinger at Laurentian University in Ottawa has developed a magnetic helmet that it's in the New Scientist if anybody wants to research this in November, December of last. There's a letter in December, and I believe the original article was in November, and it was called Alien Abductions. And by playing magnetic waves over your brain, you have an alien abduction experience.
That's very interesting.
And there are various other ways with use of signals and electricity, and basically it's the same thing no matter what technology you use. It all breaks down to the basic same kind of manipulation of the unconscious that produces both of these things. Now, whether or not there is an advanced race visiting us from interdimensional space or extraterrestrial space, I don't know. It could be that is true. But if it's not true, it's being created by the government.
Now, let's hit on that. Let's go into that.
Yeah.
Why would the government be involved in doing something like this? I mean, what's the reason for it? Are we talking about the government proper, or are we talking about segments of the government that have...
Well, no, you're talking about, we're not talking about anything that we think of as government. Most of us think of as government, where you elect a representative and send him to Congress and he haggles and makes laws and all that. We're talking about the invisible government, the cryptocracy, the thing that was set up under the National Security Act in 1947, which in fact violates the Constitution of the United States and suspends all your civil rights.
Now, this could mean then that the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing.
Of course. And also, and you can interview a number of people, as I have, who were there when it was set up. And they said, they all say, including Colonel Fletcher Prouty, who would make a great guest on your show, he says it's out of control. He said the moment they started doing those black budget things, it went off the rails.
Okay. Now,
and it is. Now, whether or not, my thesis, I went to Prouty talking to him about this. I said, look, the National Security Act was formed in September of 1947 without any real debate at all. It's like this situation we have here with these this new anti-terror laws. The panic and everybody just passed it. Whether they do that or not remains to be seen. Now let's hope that they don't. Anyway, I said, look, there it was in September. That was 2 years after the war had ended. Why hadn't they passed it in between? Prouty said, well, it was on the drawing boards. I said, but look, in June and July of 1947, that was when all the UFOs suddenly showed up. That was when Arnold coined the term flying saucers, seeing a bunch of them over the Olympic Mountains, I believe, in Washington State.
So are you saying that the whole UFO phenomena might be some kind of mind control, psychological operation type thing?
Well, it could be, because there was a satirical book written. The guy said it was just satire. But when I talked to Prouty about it, he said he thought the book was true until he talked to the author. And because he knew that that's what people were saying back in the days in the 60s when this book was printed. It was called A Report from Iron Mountain. And it says, how do we motivate this economy in peace? We don't know anything about doing that. So when the commies aren't any longer under the bed, let's have the aliens overhead.
That's okay, but I've met abductees myself and talked to them, and some of these people that I've met have had, I can't find any reason unless there's something that I'm not seeing that would imply that they have any interest to the government for any type of covert operation. However, I realize, and I want to bring this up, that there are things that are going on in your realm and this conference that you attended that does show this.
Well, we're right now working on a case here in Tucson in which a man in his late 30s murdered 2 women. He says that the aliens possessed his body. Now, this is the third case, almost identical, that has happened in this county in the last 10 years, or maybe 15 years. And it's not a very good defense. He is convinced, however, that he will be given a lethal injection and he will be resurrected because the aliens have promised him this. And I asked him, what do the aliens look like? And he said, just like you and I. I said, well, how do you tell, what do you call these aliens? Are these the Greys? He said, no, these are the Nordics. And I said, well, how can you tell humans from aliens? He said, well, these kind you can't. It's hard to tell, except these kind are telepathic. They put things in my mind, he said.
Now, why would a covert group take a guy like this?
Yeah.
What would they have to gain from doing this to him?
That's the $64 question. We're looking into the victims and to see if there's any reason to murder the victims.
Okay, now how about these people at the conference that you guys spoke with? These people that are claiming this abduction experience. What type of motivation have you been able to find that these people might serve, say a government agenda to do something?
Well, of course, then you go back to the old mind control story of mules carrying drugs, and they don't remember it. They can't act nervous because they don't know it's there. Another personality's out front. Pigeons that are carrying messages like behind post-hypnotic blocks. Slaves, sex slaves of one kind or another. Often they're trained that way from childhood, especially the women. 80% of these people are women. Now, there's all those reasons, and then the alien abduction phenomena story can be laid in as it's called screens and scrambles. And this is the common thing that we found here, that the therapists have said, let's not talk about the alien thing. Let's get on with this other thing. Now you can find credibility. They thought, their argument was, you could be credible if you say your uncle or somebody abused you. But if you say that you were abducted by aliens, that just shoot you out of the water. No court is ever going to, no jury is ever going to be convinced.
Well, it's like the Senate.
But the thing that we found out is that people today, with a high percentage of people that believe in the UFO phenomenon, people today would rather believe that there are aliens here abducting people and doing these things than to believe that the government is behind it.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's the really interesting thing. It's far easier to believe that there are aliens here doing all this weird stuff than the government is making you believe that there's aliens here.
Okay, hold that thought. My guest is Walter Bauert. Operation Mind Control is the book that he has published, and he's also the founder of the Freedom of Thought Foundation. We'll get back to that. And welcome back my guest, Walter Bauert, who is the author of Operation Mind Control. He has recently published an expanded and corrected version of the original book published in 1978. And I have seen this original book, and I can tell you that it's got a lot of interesting information in it. This stuff is, a very deep subject, and unfortunately, an hour just doesn't give us enough time to cover it all. But there is a considerable amount of concern among the psychiatric community today of ritual abuse. We see this pop up in mainstream press all the time. And, Walter has attended a conference in Dallas in March, the latter part of March of this year, that was attended by psychiatric and psychological people as well as law enforcement people, and they had people there who were claiming an alien abduction experience who had definitely backgrounds in ritual abuse. This is a very big question that we constantly are asking ourselves. What does the alien abduction experience really mean? Are we dealing with aliens from outer space? Are we dealing with some interdimensional thing? We don't really even know that the experience itself is physical, but yet the interesting parallels here are, as Walter has mentioned, that there are also there could be agencies that are masquerading and using a legitimate UFO phenomena to further their agendas, and this is just one more aspect of it that we feel we must cover. Welcome back, Walter, and let's take a call. We've got a caller from Rockford, Illinois, on our affiliate WROK. Jim, good evening, Jim.
Good evening.
Hi, Jim. Go ahead and ask your question of our guest, Walter Bauert.
Yes, Mr. Bauer, I was listening to you on the radio, and you had put out the question that if anyone had heard of NK Ultra before reported anywhere, to let you know. Well, yes, I did hear of NK Ultra. It was on I believe it was the Tom Valentine show, which is Radio Free America. That was about, I believe, around 6 weeks ago, and I believe his guest was Colonel Prouty himself.
Uh-huh. Well,
and from some of the things that he was describing about this operation, it just sounded downright scary to me.
Yes. In terms of the alien abduction phenomenon, which is the subject of this particular program, it's uncanny, the similarities between the ritual abuse survivor accounts and the alien abduction accounts. For example, both of them are afraid of hypnosis, and also both of them feel like that they were victimized. Now, that's not going to happen. Now, except that the ritual survivor, the differences are interesting. The ritual survivors are different than the alien abduction survivors because the multiple personality disorder and dissociation of all kinds is much more prevalent in the ritual abuse survivors than it is in the alien people, but they both have what's called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They both experience that and exhibit that. And, of course, they both have hallucinations, they both have depression, they both have nightmares, they both have sexual disturbances, visual disturbances, sleep difficulties, and headaches, and a whole lot of other things, So there's definitely got to be something in common here. Especially when you
as I understood the report that night that I was listening to it, that this was originally a CIA-initiated deal. Do you have any information that was this originated by the CIA?
Well, back in the 70s, when I first got the CIA documents, I found 3 documents in the big pile of MK Ultra documents that I didn't really take seriously at the time, nor look at, but it was both. They've since been published, and everybody knows about them. And they talked about using the alien or the UFO phenomenon as a psychological warfare operation. But God knows
excuse me. Yes, there was also another show that also mentioned the NK Ultra project. That was on the intelligence report. That was a shortwave radio show that no longer is being aired. But he also went into a little bit of detail about the NK Ultra project and the CIA connection.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim, we've got to move along. I want to thank you for your call. And
thanks, Jim.
All right, thank you very much.
Keep listening, okay?
Oh, okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, let's see here, Walter. We got another call. Let's take Tony from our affiliate KCNR in Salt Lake City, Utah. Good evening, Tony.
Yeah, hi, Mike.
Hi.
Couple of questions for Walter. Have you heard of a Japanese journalist named Norio Hayakawa?
Yes, I know him.
Okay, I just bought the video and haven't seen it, and so I was just wondering if you figure he's credible in his presentations and research.
I haven't seen his work, really. I couldn't tell you, but I've spoken to him. We were supposed to get together. It didn't happen. He's friends of mine. I think he's a serious researcher from what I hear.
Okay, and then kind of this MK Ultra thing, I guess from what I've heard, it kind of ties in with the Manchurian Candidate programming of someone to do a particular thing.
Well, yes, that was the original idea. It was an oversimplification of the idea that a person can be made to do something on command at long distance over the telephone. After they were properly programmed, they could do something against their will and without their knowledge. And the Manchurian Candidate, of course, was a book and a film, a book by Richard Condon, and Frank Sinatra owned the film.
Excellent movie.
And it came out the same year as the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and then was pulled for many years. It's back in your video stores, though.
So I would propound a question, perhaps, that you had talked earlier about this fellow who had been in the Army and then came out, told his mother that he was special, and then he was going around apparently with no means of support doing things, dropping off codes or receiving them and things like that.
No, he was in the regular Air Force, but his colonel didn't know what he did. He had special treatment. He was operating outside the chain of command.
So it was something where they just say, well, this guy's going to go here and do that. So
this guy's a box pusher in a supply depot, and what's he doing traveling all over the world under special orders,
Okay, Tony, we're going to have to move along.
Okay, hey, thanks.
Thanks for your call. I keep listening. We appreciate your call. Walter, now, we've only got about, let's see, how much time? We got to go to break. When we come back, I want to have you give us some information about the Freedom of Thought Foundation, and we'll have to wrap up the hour. But so anyway, stay tuned. My guest is Walter Bauert. We're talking about Operation Mind Control. We're talking about alien abductions, mind control, ritual abuse, Satanism, all these things. What do they have in common? It's very, very interesting. And welcome back. My guest is Walter Bauert. He is the author of Operation Mind Control. And we've only got a couple of minutes to wrap the program, but I wanted to go over this Freedom of Thought Foundation, and here are some of the goals. Walter, I'll read a couple of these off here for the audience.
Go ahead.
The Freedom of Thought Foundation was founded to accomplish the following goals: lend aid and protection to survivors of mind control, provide referrals for victims, and support new legislation. They want to educate society about the history of mind control. They want to develop or discover countermeasures to electronic forms of mind control and publicize them. We're going to have to do another program on this stuff because
you covered something at the beginning of the hour, utilizing the different aspects of mind control, drugs, psychotronics, which is another word that's kind of a buzzword that's new nowadays. That has to do with electronic means. I guess low frequency, high frequency types of RF emissions that can make people behave certain ways. It's all very scary, and as our caller pointed out, that stuff that he heard on MK Ultra was quite disturbing. Walter, give us some information about this book and how people can get a hold of a copy of it.
Well, we're now almost half sold out on the book. There's only 250 copies left, and this is a limited researcher's edition. I don't want to be criticized for this book or reviewed in the press or anything. This is for the people that are serious researchers to feed back and to help make it stronger and build it. And it's the only way that I know of getting the truth out, because the establishment press seems to be dark on this subject. I mean, there's really no news on it. We have approached a number of the national television shows. They said we already did that back in the 70s. And this is yet an ongoing story that now people are remembering things that happened to them in their childhood. There have been people recruited as children and abused by the federal government and made into multiple personality people who do the bidding of the government in evil and insidious forms.
Okay, give out your address and how much it is.
Okay, the book is $65. But you can get it for nothing if you want to become a charter member of the Freedom of Thought Foundation. That's $100. But you also get discounts, and you get the newsletter with that $100. So it's really a money-making deal doing it that way.
Give out your address.
Okay, the address is P.O. Box 35072, Tucson, Arizona 85740.
Okay, Walter, I'm afraid that's going to have to be the last word. It's a very interesting program. I want to thank you for coming back on with us to tell us about this conference you attended. We'll have you back to talk about this mind control issue at more length in future editions of the program, okay?
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Stay with us for more of the Paranet UFO Continuum with your host, Michael Corbin.
1-800-UFO-2009 is the number. 1-800-836-2009. Okay. My next guest comes from a small, otherwise scarcely known town, which neighbors an Area 51, which is gaining increased notoriety. In the past, the town of Rachel, Nevada was simply an oasis for the very occasional desert wayfarer, consisting of a few trailer homes and the only gas, food, and lodging for miles. Few citizens would have ever expected this tiny haven to become an active point of interest, drawing tourism, research, news media, and curiosity hunting to such a remote region. Or for such a remote reason. Aliens? Aliens. Rachel's mysterious neighbor is the U.S. Air Force. The U.S. Air Force is claimed to be secretly testing flying saucers in an area just over the Groom Lake Mountains from Rachel. My next guest tonight is Pat Travis, owner of the Little Ailey Inn. Pat, are you there?
Yes, I am, Michael.
Welcome to our program.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you asking me to be a guest.
Well, we're happy to have you. When did you start calling it the Little Ailey Inn?
In 1990.
Okay. And
Prior to that, it was the Rachel Bar and Grill.
Okay. All right. And how close are you to the infamous Area 51?
It's probably 30 miles to Area 51, but the viewing area that a lot of people use is only about 18 miles from here.
Okay. Tell us about the UFO-type decorations you have there.
Well, I have a lot of photographs that were taken from the mailbox area right across the hill from us.
Now, Pat, for our listeners, the mailbox area, is that the infamous black mailbox, I think?
That is the infamous black mailbox.
Okay, and what happens there?
Well, people just stay right near that area.
Mm-hmm.
There are other points, but that one's had more photographs taken from right there than any other that we've known about.
Okay.
And there have been sightings of craft. One man insists he has seen a being in that area.
Okay.
I mean, it sounds really strange and really wild, but it's a fact.
Okay, well, with all this notoriety, who visits your bar?
Absolutely everybody.
Okay, like base employees?
We have several that are either security guards or just personnel that work on the test site that come in here on a regular basis.
Uh-huh. And what do these base employees have to say about Area 51?
Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
No. They really do not discuss it. And we don't push those people to do it because we know that that's their job and
they're probably not going to tell you anyway.
They're not going to anyway.
Of course
I mean,
not.
they can't for their own security.
Their lips are sealed.
That's it. We hear straggle stories, but nothing that I can pinpoint.
Now, Kate, have you yourself seen anything strange in the skies around there?
We have watched a couple of objects in the sky that have been kind of different. We had one that somebody told me once it was Venus, and I pointed out, no, Venus is over there. And as we were leaving that night, this object was ground level. And the minute I told the girl about it, she had just enough time to see it, and like in the same sentence, she said, "Oh my God, it's disappeared." It was just like that. Wow. And it wasn't like something had... Usually if something disappears or a light turns off, there's an afterglow. There was nothing. It's like it went behind a mountain. It just dropped into the mountain.
Well, Pat, what do you think's going on over there?
Honestly, my honest opinion is that there are alien beings and alien craft that are over there.
Okay, now how long have you been in the area there? How long have you lived there? 6 years. And what makes you come to that conclusion?
The people that have been here and talked about it.
Okay.
We have people from all over the world that come here and talk. And some of them from other countries don't realize that you can talk about UFOs or that we're even about UFOs until they get here. But they've had encounters in other countries, not just ours. And people from all over that do a lot of research. Well, like next weekend, on the 20th, 21st, 22nd, we're going to have a UFO friendship camp out.
Okay.
Right here.
We
have speakers, one coming from Biloxi, Mississippi, one from Juneau, Alaska, one from the San Diego, California area, one from San Bernardino, and 3 from Las Vegas. And Billy Goodman is going to be here.
Billy Goodman?
Yes.
Oh, boy. 1-800-UFO-2009, 1-800-836-2009. Our guest tonight is Pat Travis, owner of the Little Ailey Inn in Rachel, Nevada. So Billy Goodman's going to be there, huh?
Yes, he will be. It's kind of a welcome home at the end of it for him. He's just gone back to Vegas. And, you know, we need to talk people about the UFOs and about the things that's actually happening around our world.
For our listeners, Billy Goodman was a personality that basically, he was around when Bob Lazar came out of the closet and started talking about all this stuff.
That's where it started.
Bob Lazar's been a speaker up there at your place, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. And he apologized to me this time for not being able to be here. But things just didn't work out time-wise for him to be able to make the trip. Which is okay. We still have his support behind us. He's a great person.
Okay. Yeah, he is. Very interesting guy. Pat, tell us a little bit about the UFO hunters that come up there. You know, the people that try to climb up the hills for a view of the base. You know, what kind of things do you see up there with these people?
Well, there's one area that you can climb. One area takes about an hour. The other takes 2.5 hours to hike up it. But you can actually see the Groom Lake facility from those particular places. They are right now attempting to take that portion of land, 4,000 acres, and I anticipate it to be at any given time.
Okay, now will that will that affect your business? I mean,
I don't really feel it will, because what we are here is an information exchange center. We've got great food, we've got ice cold beer, you know, all the necessary things.
Right.
But the one thing that was just commented out in the front, do you realize there are people from everywhere, and nobody is sitting around. Everybody's talking to one another. You go into a bar or a restaurant, most people won't even look at the people at the next table, let alone pick up a free conversation.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
And it is. Yeah. And that's how Joe and I have learned. That's why we wanted to have this camp out next weekend. So that people can actually talk to one another. Joe and I have heard so many different things from so many different people. We can't keep it all together. But we thought, my God, you know, all these people can be able to talk, and we do have these other speakers.
Give us directions up there to your place.
Well, it's 2.5 hours from Las Vegas. We are on Highway 375 in Rachel, Nevada.
Are you in Lincoln County up there?
Yes, we're Lincoln County. We're just 10 miles from the Nye County Lincoln line.
I'm just curious how you hear a lot of stories about the interaction between these UFO observers and the sheriff's department. Is there a lot of friction between them and the sheriff?
I don't really feel that there is. Of course, some people attempt to overstep the boundaries or, push the boundaries really close and give a little bit of hassle. But on a whole, I feel our Lincoln County sheriffs are really genuine in just our protection and nothing more.
Okay.
If the people do, basically how we tell them, stay away from the borders. Another thing, the closer you get to a mountain, the less you can see what comes up over the top of it.
Sure.
Where we have found a couple of really good viewpoints, nobody's ever hassled. The most that might happen is if one of our sheriffs go by, they may stop and ask them if they need some help or for identification. And it's for two reasons. We're in a remote area. If there's some strange person out there that needs, that we need to be aware of, we'll find out.
Okay. 1-800-UFO-2009, 1-800-836-2009. Our guest is Pat Travis, owner of the Little Alien in Rachel, Nevada. And when we come back from our break, Pat, let's get some information about this camp out that you're having next weekend.
Yes,
Sounds like something that people should want to make some plans for. So we'll be right back after this break. You're listening to the Paranet UFO Continuum. I'm Michael Corbin.
The Paranet UFO Continuum, in conjunction with MICAP, the Multinational Investigations Cooperative on Aerial Phenomena, is pleased to offer a portable kit containing everything you need when you come across something unusual in the sky. This kit comes in a sturdy metal box with a lock and contains binoculars, micro-cassette recorder, FM walkie-talkies, water-filled compass, 16mm telephoto camera with 1600 speed film, sample bags, notebook paper and pen, high-intensity flashlight, and official MICAP sighting report forms. The normal price of this complete kit is $289, but for a limited time you can order it for only $250 plus $10 shipping and handling. To order, call Paranet at 1-800-UFO-NET1. That's 1-800-UFO-NET1 and ask for the UT1 kit. Paranet, your window on the universe, with products and services unparalleled in the world today. Again, call 1-800-UFO-NET1.
We didn't want a professional announcer for this message because we're trying to save the Earth. Don't get me wrong, having a professional announcer would be great, but that would have taken a big casting session with people driving from all over to get here, wasting a lot of gas and adding to the pollution. And the way we see it, if our ad isn't kind to the Earth, how can we ask you to be? Use cloth shopping bags. Buy recycled paper products. Switch to energy-saving light bulbs. Yeah, maybe they're little steps, but one little step leads to another. And pretty soon they're big steps. Look, I can't tug at your heartstrings or really lay it on thick like a real announcer, but I am taking the bus home. So maybe that'll help make up for it. Call EarthShare, 1-800-488-8887. This message was brought to you by EarthShare and the Ad Council.
You're listening to the Paranet UFO Continuum. Whether or not you believe in UFOs, there's a lot about the subject you haven't heard. Stay tuned, keep an open mind, Call in and join the discussion. Once again, here's your host, Michael Corbin.
And our number is 1-800-836-2009, 1-800-UFO 2009. Our guest is Pat Travis, owner of the Little Alien in Rachel, Nevada. Next weekend, Pat, you're having a camp out, so give us a little details about that.
Next weekend, we're having the UFO Friendship Camp Out. It's here at the Little Alien in Rachel. We're on Highway 375. It costs $50 for the weekend, and that includes your meals from Friday night dinner through Sunday morning breakfast. We have 8 new speakers. These are not people that have been on a so-called circuit.
Okay.
And I think it will be really important. If any of your audience would like to call me for more information, the area code is 702-729-2515.
Do you guys do to-go orders?
Of course.
Real quick, give us...
And I'll deliver them on my way on my vacation.
Well, I'd like to be there next weekend, but I don't think I can make it. But it sounds like a really interesting time. Who's going to be speaking? Can you give their names?
I can give you names. I have Alex Collier from San Diego, California. I have a Leland Richardson from San Bernardino. I have Bill Clendenin from Biloxi, Mississippi. I have Mark Farmer from Anchorage, Alaska. Well, Juneau, Alaska. I have Cece and Brett from Las Vegas. I have a Bill Uhouse from Las Vegas. And Marcia Johnson, also of Las Vegas, is bringing a panel of people for question and answers, including teenagers.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, Pat, I want to thank you very much for being our guest tonight.
I want to thank you for having us.
And say hello to Billy for me, okay?
I'll do that.
Okay.
And you guys come on out and see us, everybody that's listening.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Pat. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Before we go off the air tonight, I wanted to give you a little bit of information about how you can go about getting information, some of the files that we carry on Paranet, if you do not use a computer and a modem. As we've mentioned before on the program, our network is one of the largest repositories of information on the paranormal and UFOs. If you'll grab a pen, I will tell you how to get a catalog of these files. You can write to us at P.O. Box 172, Wheat Ridge, Colorado, 80034-0172. That's Box 172, Wheat Ridge, Colorado, 80034-0172. And if you'll send $5 with a request for a catalog, we will send you a complete listing of all the files that we have. And if you place an order for any of those files, we will give you $3 of that $5 back. So be sure and give us this information, and we'll get you a catalog out, because we do have a lot of interesting files. Okay, well, that just about wraps it up for us tonight. We will be back next week, and we hope to have some interesting calls, and we'll talk to you next week. Be sure to keep your eyes on the sky, and we will talk to you next week. Good night.